When people think about global oil power, they usually imagine Saudi Arabia, the United States, or maybe Russia sitting at the top of the energy chessboard. Very few people stop to consider how a country under decades of sanctions, constant surveillance, cyber warfare, covert operations, and political isolation could quietly reshape the global oil game without firing a single missile. Yet this is exactly what Iran did. From the perspective of intelligence analysis, Iran's most powerful move was not military, not nuclear, and not even diplomatic in the traditional sense. It was strategic patience combined with economic warfare, executed slowly, deliberately, and largely unnoticed by the public. As a former CA analyst would see it, Iran understood something most Western policymakers underestimated. Oil is not just a commodity. Oil is leverage, oil is timing, oil is psychology, and oil is survival. While the world focused on Iran's nuclear centrifuges, Tehran was building a parallel energy strategy designed to function even if it was cut off from the global system entirely. This strategy did not aim to dominate headlines. It aimed to dominate outcomes. For decades, Iran was treated as an oil state that could be squeezed into submission. Sanctions were imposed with the belief that cutting Iran's access to oil markets would cripple its economy and force political concessions. On paper, the logic made sense. Oil exports made up a significant portion of Iran's revenue. Block the exports, collapse the economy, trigger internal pressure, and eventually force compliance. But intelligence work is about understanding human behavior, not just economic charts, and Iran did not respond the way Washington expected. Instead of collapsing, Iran adapted. Instead of retreating, it evolved. And instead of depending on the traditional oil market, Iran began constructing an alternative ecosystem that changed how oil power actually works in the modern world. One of Iran's most underestimated moves was its decision to stop behaving like a predictable oil exporter. Traditional oil states rely on transparency, shipping records, public contracts, and compliance with global financial systems. Iran systematically dismantled that model for itself. It learned how to sell oil invisibly. Through ship-to-ship transfers, reflagged tankers, ghost fleets, and complex barter arrangements, Iran created a shadow oil economy that intelligence agencies could track but not fully stop. This was not chaos, it was design. Every sanctioned barrel of oil that still reached a buyer was a message. Iran could survive without permission. Over time, this changed buyer behavior. Countries that needed cheap oil and were willing to take risks learned that Iran was reliable, flexible, and politically resilient. China, in particular, became a silent beneficiary of this system. Iranian oil flowed east, often under different names, through different routes, priced attractively, and delivered consistently. From an intelligence perspective, this was a shift in leverage. Sanctions are only powerful if they isolate. Iran made isolation impossible by creating dependency in reverse. Once buyers relied on discounted Iranian oil, they became stakeholders in Iran's survival. This is where the global oil game quietly changed. Another critical move Iran made was internal. While sanctioned states often suffer from underinvestment, Iran invested aggressively in refining capacity. Instead of exporting only crude oil, Iran expanded its ability to refine oil domestically into gasoline, petrochemicals, and industrial products. This reduced its dependence on imports and allowed it to export higher-value products that were harder to track and sanction. This mattered more than most people realized. Crude oil is easy to sanction. Refined products move through complex supply chains and are harder to trace. By shifting part of its oil economy downstream, Iran reduced its vulnerability while increasing flexibility. It also allowed Iran to support allied states with fuel, creating regional energy influence independent of global markets. Iran's energy strategy also intersected with geopolitics in a way that intelligence agencies could not ignore. By providing fuel to allies like Syria, Lebanon, and Venezuela, Iran used oil as a stabilizing force for friendly regimes. This was not charity, it was strategic investment. Fuel shipments kept governments functioning, populations calm, and political alliances intact. Oil became Iran's tool of regional diplomacy. At the same time, Iran invested heavily in controlling choke points. The Strait of Hormuz is not just a geographic feature, it is a psychological weapon. Roughly 1/5 of the world's oil passes through it. Iran understood that it did not need to block the strait to influence markets, it only needed to remind the world that it could. Every naval exercise, every drone flyover, every carefully leaked threat sent oil prices upward. Iran learned how to move markets with words instead of weapons. From an intelligence standpoint, this was asymmetric warfare at its finest. A single statement from an Iranian commander could trigger price volatility across global markets. This volatility affected Western economies, political approval ratings, and election cycles. Iran had discovered that instability itself was leverage. Perhaps Iran's most sophisticated move was its alignment with other sanctioned or semi-isolated powers. Russia, facing its own sanctions, found common ground with Iran in energy coordination. While they were competitors in some markets, they were partners in resisting Western dominance. This informal axis of sanctioned states created alternative pricing mechanisms, alternative insurance systems, and alternative financial pathways. This was not a formal alliance announced at a press conference. It was a functional alignment born out of necessity. Intelligence analysts watching this development saw a worrying trend. The global oil market was fragmenting. Instead of one unified system dominated by Western rules, multiple parallel systems were emerging. Iran was not leading this alone, but it was one of the earliest architects. Iran also understood timing better than its adversaries. It did not rush to flood markets. It released oil strategically, often during moments of global crisis. When supply disruptions occurred elsewhere, Iranian oil quietly filled gaps. This trained markets to rely on Iran without publicly acknowledging it. Over time, this eroded the effectiveness of sanctions as an economic weapon. Internally, Iran maintained political stability by framing oil resistance as national survival. Intelligence agencies often underestimate ideology, but Iran fused economic policy with identity. Selling oil under sanctions was not just business. It was resistance. This narrative unified elites, technocrats, and security institutions around a single goal: endurance. From the CIA analytical lens, the most dangerous thing about Iran's oil strategy was not what it did, but what it proved. It proved that sanctions are not permanent solutions. It proved that energy dominance can be challenged without matching military power. And it proved that global systems built on compliance can be bypassed through innovation and patience. By the time Western policymakers began to acknowledge this shift, the game had already changed. Oil markets were no longer just about supply and demand. They were about geopolitics, shadow logistics, financial creativity, and psychological pressure. Iran had forced a redefinition of power. This does not mean Iran won, in a traditional sense. Its economy suffered, its people paid a heavy price. But survival itself was victory in a system designed to crush it. And survival turned into influence. Today, when oil prices react sharply to Middle Eastern tensions, Iran's presence looms large. Traders factor in Iranian responses. What was negotiate with a SSUMED? Calculate comfort is not cock. Pa proof of fisks around stlbness. A bility energy leverage. All of this traces back to a series of quiet decisions made years ago. The irony is that Iran's most powerful move was never secret. It was simply ignored. Analysts warned that pushing a rich, technologically capable state into a corner would force adaptation. That adaptation would create new systems, and those systems would weaken the old order. Iran became the case study that proved them right. In the end, the global oil game did not change because Iran became stronger than the West. It changed because Iran became unpredictable in a system that depended on predictability. It changed because Iran refused to disappear, and it changed because oil, once seen as a tool of control, became a weapon of resistance. From an intelligence perspective, this is the lesson policymakers struggle to accept. Pressure does not always produce submission. Sometimes it produces evolution, and when that evolution is driven by necessity, it can reshape global systems in ways that no military intervention ever could. Iran's move was not loud, it was not dramatic, it did not come with speeches or declarations. It came with tankers that vanished and reappeared, with refineries quietly expanding, with alliances forming in the shadows, and with markets slowly adjusting to a new reality. By the time the world noticed, the rules had already changed.